Okay, welcome back. As I mentioned before, we have Adam Larkin here. Adam Larkin is one of our financial advisors here at Blue Chip Partners, and him, along with myself, a relatively new parent. So who better to talk to about the optimal ways to save and invest for a child's future education? There is clearly a growing cost of college, right?
Yep.
Growing well above the rate of inflation. At least that has been the case. And so plain and simple, I think everyone realizes how important it is to save for a child's future education, but there's this ongoing question in probably the back of every parent's mind: what is the best way to save for a child's future education? Everyone should be familiar with the 529 plan. Maybe you aren't, but I think I'm going to start this conversation off with a very blunt question, Adam. What's the best way to save for a child's future education?
Yeah, well, the answer to that question is that it depends. There's not a one-size-fits-all answer to this question. And I would say also the other thing to consider is whether or not you want to be saving for education at all, or if you'd be preferring to save for other items. Maybe you want to eventually help your child put a down payment on a house or to fund their own wedding as opposed to paying for their own education. I've certainly heard some differing opinions on whether or not college will continue to be, sort of this institution that it is now, and sort of this expectation for all kids that are graduating high school as kind of the logical next step. If the price continues to increase, I've heard of plenty of people who are thinking, maybe working in the trades will be the way of the future instead of choosing to go to a university for 4 years, as most of us have done. So there's a lot of different ways to approach this. There's a lot of different things to consider, either as a new parent or a new grandparent, but lots of different things that you could do. And so that's kind of what I wanted to get into first. I wanted to talk about some of the questions that you probably want to be asking yourself before deciding on the right ways to save for your kids or for your grandkids. So the first is what I had mentioned. How do you want to use these funds? What are you hoping that your kids are going to be using this money for? The second is, who do you want to have control of these funds? There's different ways for you to save where you retain control of the money. There's other ways that you would essentially be handing over control of those funds, and it's not immediate. I wouldn't be giving my 3-month-old daughter that money right now, but I could be transferring it to her name so that when she reaches the age of majority, that money would legally be hers. So the other questions that you want to be asking yourself is, do you anticipate that you'll end up with a taxable estate? Meaning, could you be taking advantage of making a gift each year up to the annual exclusion amount? Where are you in terms of your tax bracket right now? Are you looking for a tax advantageous way to save? And then whether or not you think that you'll need some financial aid or your child will need it, because there's different considerations you would have based on the way you save. So
those are clearly some of what you would call key considerations, right?
Yes.
The questions to ask yourself when you're considering different options for saving for future plans, if
Yes.
you will. Maybe if we just drill down into the nuts and bolts of maybe the most common education investment related vehicle, the 529 plan. Can you
Yep.
talk about how that would pertain and I guess what buckets would that fill in
Yep.
for some of those key considerations that you walk through?
Absolutely. So the 529 college savings plan is meant specifically for education. So this is one where if you were considering trying to put money aside to help for a wedding or for a house down payment, this might not be your best option. These funds are meant specifically for education. But because they're set up for that specific purpose, you receive this tax advantage, right? So you're able to put some after-tax money into a 529 savings plan. Depending on the state you live in, there may be some tax advantages or tax credits that you get for making those contributions. But those funds are allowed to grow tax-free, tax-deferred, until your child reaches the age that they would be going to school. And so long as those funds are used for qualified education expenses, then they also are, you don't have to pay tax on any of the growth in that account as well. So you get the tax advantage by saving into these plans. Now, like I said, it's meant specifically for education. If you ever wanted these funds back, you would have to pay a 10% penalty on any growth in the account, and you'd also have to pay taxes on that account.
And it's important to remember that that's only on the growth. So if you deposited over the years $50,000 into a 529 and it grew to $55,000, the $50,000 is not taxed nor penalized, right? So there's only a 10% penalty plus tax on the $5,000 of gains. So the vast majority of that money is still accessible. It sounds worse at a surface level than it actually is. Not that 10% plus tax is insignificant, but it's just on the gain. It's not on the whole amount. And I think that can be missed.
That's right.
Are contribution limits, do those exist for 529s?
They do, yep. So there are some contribution limits. The one that's well known and talked about, so you are able to pull forward 5 years of your annual gift exclusion amount. So this year in 2025, the maximum annual exclusion amount is $19,000 per if each parent wanted to give, so per parent, and then per child. So if you had multiple children, so you could do $19,000 for both each of the two spouses to each kid that they have. And then you can pull forward 5 years worth of those contributions to do in one single year.
Yeah.
So
that would be for somebody who's interested in depositing more of a lump sum into a plan so that the tax deferral and the compounding of the money can start sooner rather than funding it year by year.
That's right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
Does that account for, let's say, okay, so each parent can give that 19 to meet that kind of threshold.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say a grandparent wanted to make a contribution as well. How does that come into the fold? Like, would that technically, would that be attributed to a parent, or how does that work? How does that exclusion?
No, that would be the grandparents, that they would be able to make their own contribution.
Got it. Okay.
So yep, they can do their own. They have up to 19,000 themselves as well.
Okay.
So last thing that I wanted to mention about these 529 plans is what you would do if you were ever to overfund them, meaning you saved up more than what your child might need for college. So the first option is that you could always retitle them into the name of another familial beneficiary. So
brother,
let's say,
sister,
grandchild. So if you are a new parent, say I was saving for my daughter, I overfunded her 529. Whenever she were to have kids, if I wanted to retitle into the name of her kids, I could do that as well.
Got it. Okay.
So kind of a gift for her. So you could do that. The other option that's now available to you as of last year is that you're able to roll over up to $35,000 lifetime for each beneficiary. So in the example again of my daughter, if we've overfunded her 529, each year we're able to contribute or roll over from the 529 into a Roth IRA in her name up to the annual amount that she's able to contribute. So that for this year is $7,000.
Okay, so I think what's important there for parents and grandparents to keep in mind is that saving for a 529 not only can work for educational costs, but if there's excess funding, you can then plant the seeds, the initial foundation of saving for retirement. And as long as you're following the general rules, you can move a portion, some or all of that savings that was initially meant for education over to retirement. That's really cool. I feel like that's a unique feature, an enhancement to the 529 structure that didn't exist. I think was it just over the last couple of years? Last year. Yeah. So it's a new feature, and I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. So not all is lost, right? It doesn't have to become this account where if you don't, contribute to it perfectly, that it's lost, or you would have to pay penalty to get some of the growth back out of the account. You can either retitle it into the name of somebody else, or like you said, you can start to help your children save for their own retirement.